Personally, would like lunch. Fat man, food outside, keeping me from food. I'm kind of curious. Chapter 0 of the cloud. Chapter 0 of the cloud. Who are the authors of the cloud story, really?
I think there are too many authors at this point. The biggest thing I see when we go out, and I'm sure many of you experience as well, my colleagues out there, is customers are confused. They're confused. The difference this time is that the industry, IT industry, the telecom industry generally like to hype things. Hype the trough of disillusionment and all that.
Yeah, those
things. But this one is not a fad. It's a secular trend, and people understand that. This will, I'm not using the word paradigm. Called it a secular trend. It's going to happen. Whether they call it cloud or you call it a self-service shared services environment, it is going to happen. And customers, whether the business sees it, like I mentioned, and IT's scared. And they're trying to actually close that gap and catch up, and people are generally confused. And it's our job, I like to say, it's our job, and we don't do a very good job of it as an industry, of really demystifying and creating a simplified view of what the cloud from a business benefit perspective is.
Do you think if we hadn't have had the GFC and the focus on the cost models of business, the cloud would have got as much traction so quickly?
I think it was a good stimulus. It made people think. I won't use the word out of the box either for you. I think people were thinking differently now. IT budgets clearly aren't going up. And people need to think differently of how they're going to squeeze and optimize and utilize the dollars. It goes back to me. If 70, and I'm being generous here, we go out every year and we talk and meet our global 2,000 customers, which are the largest enterprises on the planet. I'm being generous when I say they spend 70% of their IT budgets on operations. A lot of them are spending, some of them will say they're spending 90%. They have to fundamentally do things a different way.
Also argue that the vendors could reduce their costs of maintenance, but that would be unnecessary. I agree with your comment about hybrid environments. I think that's where we're in now. Given the comment about there's a lot of authors, there's a lot of confusion about cloud, and then we're going to move to a potentially more complex cloud environment, off-prem, all that. How do you take organizations and get them to understand where they're going to end up? How do they manage a hybrid environment? Is it possible?
So when we go in to talk to customers, the first thing we generally recommend is to run them through, I like to call it a therapy session. We call it a cloud discovery workshop, but it ends up being a therapy session. And what we do, it takes about a day. This is not the no pressure. Ultimately, they may decide to go with somebody else. It's not HP technology. We run them through with their executive team, not the IT guys, with the CEO, the CFO, the CTO, the marketing leads, the business line managers. We run them through a thought process of what are the implications for my organization? Security, compliance, what applications and services do we need to run? What are we running today? Infrastructure, communications, blah, blah, blah. There's like 12 or 15 topics that we run them through. At the end of that day, and in the subsequent week, they will come out with, in most cases, a very clear, pragmatic path to hybrid compute delivery. Meaning not only the cloud, whether they're going to use private or hybrid, but actually what are they going to do with their traditional environment as well. And what they told us was, the best value of it was that we could not get our internal act together. We needed a third party to facilitate the conversation to get the management team aligned.
You talked a little bit about that sort of server storage combination that HP can bring. There's a couple of things that you didn't reference, which I'm curious about. First is the security aspect, in terms of how HP approaches that. But then also, if I look at where enterprises are taking their access points, mobility. What's HP's position around that? Are you very agnostic of mobility?
No.
In terms of access point?
No, we will. Like I said, we'll support any open networking standard equipment vendor, whether it be any of the lead, Cisco, Brocade, Juniper, Aruba, Maru, anybody. We have a very strong mobility portfolio ourselves. Coming out with some very innovative products as it relates to 2.11n. Mobile security, mobile management, etc., where we've melded together our wired and wireless portfolios. So we're actually always going to lead with that, but understand that customers do have preferences and traditional environments. As it relates to security, we've made some acquisitions over the last 18 months, including Tipping Point, which is the leader in intrusion prevention systems. Unfortunately, the Gartner Magic Quadrant for security since its inception in 2005. ArcSight, Fortify. So we have a very strong active infrastructure security portfolio as well, but we're also open and understand that there are others working with all the security vendors out there as well to integrate into the industry.
So again, I'm curious about this from the acquisitions vertical, which to me is an interesting one. If I look at where organizations are thinking about business analytics in the cloud, is that part of the HP cloud stack, if you want to go through, or is that separate?
Yes. So for folks that are familiar with Vertica, big data we call it, big analytics. So if you think about data in the cloud, wow, what a great fit. So as you look at it, it goes back. When you look from a cloud system perspective and being the umbrella called the umbrella heterogeneous management environment, Vertica with big data, or whether it be Teradata or Oracle or whatever, will fit nicely as one of these, call it, application service sources or data sources in a cloud environment.
I want to flip you back to the comment about the GFC, because there were a lot of CFOs looking at cloud as a CapEx OpEx sort of argument, and then brought in a lot of discussions around ROI and TCO. What do you think is HP's, or do you have advantages in that market in terms of cost models, ROIs that you can bring to an organization for a cloud?
Well, I think in general, as the largest IT company on the planet, we have very, very clear economic advantages. I think it's public data. Our supply chain is, I don't know if that's a number I can give, our supply chain is somewhere between 50 and 75 billion US a year.
I'm sorry, I've just noticed one of your likely people. No, I'm talking about that.
Yeah, it's a very large number.
26 it was, wasn't it?
And with that number comes incredible advantages from an economic perspective.
So where do you in terms of that discussion with an organisation, a large enterprise, because the cloud is not just a start. I mean, it can be a relatively replicable point. But how focused are they on the TCO and ROI? How important is that? And where is the advantage to on this much?
So everybody talks about it. The number one reason people are going to move to, for instance, from a virtualized environment to a private cloud is agility and speed. That's usually kind of the number one thing because they want to close that business IT gap. Everybody talks about TCO ROI. I think it's very early in the game. And the interesting point is that most, if not all, enterprises have no means to benchmark themselves. So when they say, I've got to benchmark my cloud TCO or ROI, what am I benchmarking against? So they all talk about, well, let's use the chargeback model. What am I going to benchmark myself against? So everybody talks a good game, but this goes back to chapter 0. We are not there yet in terms of being able to benchmark, not only with myself. Let's say I'm deploying a private cloud, I want to benchmark against my traditional environment. How am I ever going to benchmark if I want to move to the public cloud? So I'm going to benchmark against the service providers offering against what?
So let me just touch on this, because I was talking to an organisation in AP, a regional organisation, that had heavily moved into infrastructure as a service in the cloud environment, and had been doing it for 2 years, and had saved absolutely no money whatsoever. And I think there's going to be many more organisations that will look at cloud as a cost advantage, but then get into it and go, we're not saving money. Do you think that's a fair observation, or do you think organisations are going to actually significantly drop their costs?
I think if somebody goes in looking to deploy a cloud with the top reason being cost savings, I think they're going to be very disappointed.
So what should come back to that? If you say you drop my cost 30%, your response is going to be what?
Well, so I think cost is one element of it. An optimal cost envelope and having an optimal list of IT, whether it's private, traditional, and hybrid. I think mostly it's agility and speed to revenue, time to revenue. It's also flexibility to plan, for unpredictable business demands. I think that's really when you look at the elasticity of the cloud and the flexibility of the cloud, I think those are the bubbles at the top. And cost needs to be in there, but it's almost as cost is sort of in the third position in my mind.
Take a pause for a minute and just ask anybody in the audience have a question for Steve?
That gentleman.
You guys better not be repackaging this up and selling it.
Thank you. So you agree that cloud is a journey, do you?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, when do you say that this is a cloud infrastructure? Because there are multiple definitions. There is virtualization, automation, blah, blah, blah. So what is HP's definition of, hey, this is what makes a cloud, number one? Number two, how do you account for the revenue? So let's say if you were to make a scale of an automation there, back in the software, for the cloud infrastructure, would you still say it's a cloud to you?
Good questions. So, a lot of people equate virtualization with cloud. They're not equivalent. Virtualization is a technology that's part of the cloud environment. When you look at cloud, there are, whether it's IDC or Gartner, and generally everybody has the same definition. From a fundamental, really basic comparison. Self-service, needs to be automated, needs to be open, needs to be shared services, needs to be metered, needs to be based on internet technology. Those are kind of the six. Then the other six that I put up there are sort of taking it to the next level of things that we believe from HP. Refresh my memory in the same time.
When you say, how do you count revenue?
Revenue, right. So, everybody's going to come out and give you a number of what is. From our perspective, we're looking at it from, there will always be a base set of technologies as part of a cloud opportunity. One way we'll do that is we'll measure it by cloud system, which is an integrated system, and we'll measure it. But there's an underpinning technology also, elements of cloud system, that wouldn't be categorized as cloud system. For instance, our virtual and physical provisioning monitoring capabilities at the bottom that may have vSphere or Hyper-V or vCloud Director or System Center on top. Would we count that as cloud? If it's used in probably. If it's vCloud Director on top of our Blade System Matrix, sure. I'm not going to be a Boy Scout about it.
Just a follow-up question. So we've heard about a slew of appliances coming out as cloud appliances. And unfortunately, appliances as a line of business hasn't really been a hard line of business by any vendor. Now, how do we see that changing? Because again, what we're doing is we sort of putting constraints in the entire cloud concept and saying you can scale up to 500 terabytes networks. That's it. For an organization, it doesn't know if it's going to need more than that or not. How do you actually get justification for somebody in an enterprise who doesn't know about this appliance?
So, an appliance is not a cloud. And there are certain vendors out there that are talking about a cloud. It's actually an appliance. It's a closed box. It's got one hypervisor, one OS, very limited applications. And that's an appliance. It's very well packaged. It's got all sorts of value chain advantages. It's priced to win. It does something very well. That's not a cloud. A cloud is a much more diverse workload environment. So I think it's an education process as well. That's not to say that you're not going to have appliances in your cloud environment. It just needs to be managed in the right way. So your cloud, for instance, if you've got it in your service catalog, launch, whatever, X, Y, and Z, that may be executed off an appliance, but it's being managed in your cloud environment as a very focused resource pool.
Okay. Any questions?
You said that applications and services are the key to the cloud, but what we notice is a lot of the applications, the business critical applications, have not been created for a multi-tenancy environment, right? And you will not find the big movement happening unless this changes. So, are there any initiatives which HP is doing or the whole industry is doing to make that happen? Right? And is it very relevant to help this transition?
So we categorize that as application transformation activities. Yeah, we have a huge effort at HP, and that goes back well before the cloud was a fad. ER, enterprise services, which was called AES before. So that one of their big practices is application transformation. So they do look, and there are a large number of applications, mainframe based, that are never going to be pulled off that. They are fused to the box. And that's okay. They run well. Everything doesn't have to, everything isn't going to be cloud. But where we can help them with it and analyzing and helping them transform that application to a new architecture in a multi-tenancy environment, we will do that.
So I have a question for you. You've got platform, infrastructure, and applications. So there are three stacks of cloud that organizations are mostly familiar with. Where does it go after that? Does it go into business process? What is the end point for an organization? Is there one?
Who knows what's going to happen? What's the next big thing? The analyst is the big thing. Well, I mean, if you look at the market today, infrastructure as a service and platform as a service are very small from a market perspective overall. As you move up, then you go to software as a service, which is actually fairly big. Salesforce.com, whatever, you know. Then if you get up to BP, business processes as a service, that's the biggest market in its entirety today. Because that's been going on for many years before the word cloud even started popping up. And that will be, as folks start to, as I think you and I talked about, outsource horizontal applications, which are not mission critical or differentiating in many cases. I see that trend going even further.
Okay, final question. Perfect world. An organization asked me last year, they have terabytes of data in storage right now. Is it possible for them to take the data in a public and private cloud environment and move it around on an hourly basis across arbitrage? Can I flow terabytes of data on a cost arbitrage basis in and out of private cloud and public cloud? If I would do that, when will that happen? Or is that a time period?
So I don't think there's too many people doing that today. I can tell you that some of the technology that we purchased recently allows it to happen from a storage perspective, repart. It has what we call autonomic capabilities, which automatically, based on policies, based on trends and so forth, moves data between various tiers. It could move it across geographies. I don't see a lot of people doing that other from a disaster recovery perspective right now, but in terms of cost and flopping it back and forth, I think we go back to the question that a gentleman asked back there, is the network, so you have to retool your network. So we go full circle back. In that case, I think you'd be retooling your network to have the performance you're looking for.
Let's go this one.
Yeah, Vidya from Frost & Sullivan. I wanted to repeat Sanchit's question in the last panel about, so a large percentage of your customers you help them set up their architectures, existing architectures, infrastructure with your IT systems, software, hardware solutions, right? Now, the more you're marketing cloud, the more you're asking them to depart from those, which, as he says, as something like 97% utilization. What percentage of your existing customers do you anticipate or expect to transition to cloud-based platforms in the next 2 to 3 years?
So let me utilize it, because HP has a pretty wide spectrum of customers. Everybody from the Fortune 500 down to you bought a printer probably from us, I'm guessing. When I look at the enterprise segment of the market, I anticipate almost every single enterprise customer moving to some sort of hybrid compute model. Public, private, hybrid, and traditional IT. We see that. How fast that's going to happen, I think we're in for a very long journey. As I think was saying. This is a journey, it's a pragmatic, stepwise approach, and people are not, people never move as fast as you think they're going to move. But they will move, like I said. This is a paradigm shift. It's a secular trend, and there's distinct business value, and people see it.
So is HP actually helping the customers to identify what kind of applications or like internal processes they should move to cloud versus what they should keep within their existing IT?
Actually, part of that cloud discovery workshop that I mentioned before, what applications are targets to move initially. Let me give you one piece of wisdom based on very recent lesson learned. If a customer moves rapidly to the cloud and tries to do too much, Let me use enterprise company X. I've seen it 10 times in the last 3 months. I'm in it. IT organization, we've got to move really fast because I want to impress the CFO that we can establish credibility and ROI really quickly. What they do is they deploy a private cloud and they try to do too much too fast, including moving legacy applications and legacy infrastructure into the cloud environment. So they come almost hybrid, heterogeneous. Mistake. They try, it becomes a colossal mess. Just imagine, anytime you do legacy transitions infrastructure, it's always going to take you longer and cost more. And what that does, it doesn't allow that IT or that CIO to prove credibility and return on investment very quickly. My advice to every customer I see, if you want to move to the cloud, particularly mostly everybody's going to move to a private cloud first, carve off something that you want to do, particularly dev test, set up a separate environment, do that really well, do it very fast, prove ROI to your CFO, and then move forward. And the other words of wisdom is, if you're going to screw things up, screw them up really quickly. So your lessons learned, and then you can start over again. And a lot of people will screw up.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, if you would please thanks to Dietch for spending some time on stage with us and answering all those questions. Very much.
Thank you very much.